Well, good day, grounds crew. Hope all is well. I'm Scott Belford. This is the walk off. It is a Monday morning mailbag on a Tuesday afternoon. Normally, I would be joined by the one and only Adam Mack. This time, it's my fault he's not here. I am going to Buffalo in a few hours here to cover the Bisons over the next couple days. And so I needed Adam to be up very early so I could get on the road in time to do so. It's his wife's birthday yesterday, so he was out celebrating. And when we were talking about it, he's like, I'll try and drag my butt out of bed for 7 a.m. Alberta time. And I was like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I will do mailbag and then we will reconvene on Friday. So I am going to go through all of your questions and comments from the last week. You can always get a hold of us on Twitter, a Walk Off Podcast, on Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. The Patreon bump still in effect. So if you are a Patreon member, you automatically get into the mailbag for your questions or comments to be read or answered. And then you can also leave your comments right here on YouTube, and we will get to as many of them as possible. The season marches on. Whether it's been the most enjoyable season to watch or not, it does continue. And it's funny how there keeps, I keep having these moments throughout the season where I'm like, wow, maybe this team isn't quite as defunct offensively as I thought. Maybe they're starting to pull out of it. I think we've all had those moments throughout 2024. Maybe you keep saying that word. Maybe it's actually not as bad as we thought. And then you hit a 4 game stretch like we just had, and you're like, oh, yeah, this team doesn't score. I mean, they did get one win against the Cubs. A bunch of folks went down to cheer on the Blue Jays in Chicago. Wrigley Field, absolutely incredible. If you haven't been, it is an icon amongst baseball stadiums. Truly one of my favorite, even though it's like Fenway a little bit, where you're like, well, this is obviously not very comfortable for fans, and you're in like weird little nooks and crannies that, I mean, it's over 100 years old, right? So it is what it is, but it just emanates this baseball history that is beautiful. And of course, a bunch of folks went down. You could hear the Go Blue Jays Go chants. One of the things about this organization that's beautiful, right, is everywhere they go on the road, there are Jays fans that make the trek. Taking these trips are one of my favorite things to do in the summer, going to opposing teams' ballparks and checking out the Jays. But yeah, the one win, 1-0, right? That's been the theme of this season. They don't put up runs, and then they start to show momentum like they can put up runs, and then you're right back to hoping that the Joey Loperfino home run stands and is enough. And it was, but to lose, what was it, 3-2? And then yesterday's game was just brutal to watch. The Cincinnati Reds in town. Ellie De La Cruz making his debut in Toronto. Superstar, right? Guy to fun to watch, but sure not as fun when the Reds absolutely demolished the Blue Jays. So we're going to get into it. All sorts of stuff to touch on. One of the most common questions that we have been getting, and I do wish to attach a little apology to this one, which is, why do you guys keep missing long toss? Isn't it supposed to be every week? So to that I say, yes, it is supposed to be every week. I know that this last month has not been an overly successful month of being consistent. We've done 2 out of the last 4 available shows on the Sundays. I'm sorry. Yesterday, especially, was my screw up. I was on the road this weekend. I was doing some comedy up in Sudbury, and like a dummy, I left my laptop charger in the hotel in Sudbury, and they shipped it to me yesterday, which was very nice of them. A tip of the hat to Quality in Sudbury. Although I will say, without the ability to have my laptop charged, there was no one else to run it, and so that's on me. My apologies. Big plans to have it back up and running Sunday. I know you've heard that from us before, but again, I love doing long toss. I put a bunch of effort in this spring to try and spread the workload around so that we would always have a show every single Sunday. Brought in Juan Forno from the Walk-Off Mariners to also help co-host, to always have a show. And it just has not worked out that way. I appreciate that you guys enjoy it as much as you do. So I take the negative comments almost as a compliment, where you're like, what the hell? I like this. Fucking let's get to it. Put it on already. So all I can say is we're trying. I swear we're trying. And next Sunday, fingers crossed, it goes off without a hitch. There you go. There's my excuse that nobody cares about, right? Excuses. I'm Shapiroing right now. Let's get into Mailbag. We're going to start with Twitter. Again, you can always DM on Twitter. Reach out to us. I'm very responsive there. It's at Walk Off Podcast. This one comes from Jenna, who DM'd us. She says, hey guys, hoping to get on Mailbag this week. I haven't got on the last couple. Well, Jenna, look at you, persistency paying off big here. She goes, with the Reds in town, I figured Joey Votto would finally get the call up at being his former team, but it doesn't look like that's happening. Is he not even going to play this year at all? So I might be in the minority here, but the fact that I'm going down to Buffalo to cover the Bisons today and tomorrow, I was fingers crossed he wouldn't get called up yesterday. I was like, come on, let me meet Joey Votto. Let me have a chat with him. That would be the coolest thing ever. One of the top Canadians to ever play the game, an icon in Cincinnati, an icon in Etobicoke, right? A Etobicoke kid. And yeah, the story of him playing for his hometown Toronto Blue Jays will be a good one. I'm glad that he's going to be around in Buffalo for this, though. I did kind of plan this trip around, fingers crossed, getting to chat with the man and also getting to talk with some of the new Blue Jays. I know that I reached out to Pat. He's the guy who runs the media section for the Blue Jays there, and he has said that most likely Joey is going to speak to media, so I should be able to get to at least be in the scrum. By the way, feel free, grounds crew, to drop questions for Joey below. Fun questions, okay? Because I don't want to be the guy being like, what's it been like to be injured all season? Obviously, it fucking sucks, right? I wanna ask him. I got a few, right, where like obviously he's known throughout his career to be hip and fashionable. And I'm curious if being with the kids all season long, right? Being down in Dunedin and then in Buffalo, being around all these aspiring professional ball players. I shouldn't say that. Obviously, they're professional major league ball players. Have you learned any hip new lingo or slang from the kids? That's what I want to ask them, right? See if these kids have taught them anything new. Yeah, drop your questions. Fun questions for Joey. Do my job for me, I guess, is what I'm asking of you here, grounds crew. So yes, do I think Joey is going to eventually get the call up? It feels like it might be even something that they do the last homestand of the year. I know that Votto came out yesterday, and Shai Davidi reported on it, I think is who mentioned it, that he would like to feel at his best, and he doesn't feel like he's there yet. It's been a long road to recovery since stepping on that bat. If I'm Joey Votto, I'm putting firm rules in place in every clubhouse I go into. No bats laying around. I'm the dad yelling at the kid for leaving his Lego on the floor, right? You pick up your bats. My ankles can't take another rolling. I'll be out until 2027 if I step on another bat. These are the rules. I'm Joey Votto, right? But I do think he is going to make an appearance as a Toronto Blue Jay. I think that the organization knows that there's big value in that. Even having him up for one game, I have no doubt there'll be Joey Votto City Connect jerseys everywhere. There'll be Joey Votto Blue Jays jerseys wherever you look. Yes, the organization wants in on that merch money. So, yeah, Jenna, I do think he is going to eventually play this year, but who knows when. I just drank coffee for all of you listening on audio. My apologies. Just got to get that caffeine in you, right? Sticking with Twitter. Going to Francois. He DM'd us. He says, "Hey guys, love the show. Appreciate that, Francois. Curious on your thoughts that the team is moving on from Bichette this offseason. All the reports are saying he's all but traded." And I don't know if you caught this, but Bob Nightengale, nicknamed Boob Nightengale because of how often he is incorrect in his tweets, something to keep in mind with this little tidbit that he let out. But Bob Nightengale was reporting that the Toronto Blue Jays do seem poised to move Bichette in the offseason. Now, what Bob is known for is deductive reasoning, looking at a situation in baseball and making an educated prediction and hoping that he gets it right. I honestly believe that that's what this is. Now, I also think that it is very likely that Bichette is probably moved in the offseason. I think where there's smoke, there is fire, and there has been plenty of smoke on this front. Now, do I wish to see Bichette traded? I don't think I do. If they can figure something out with him, and I don't think they can. So it would be malpractice by this front office to not get all the assets out of one of the major pieces of this current core before he walks for nothing, for a compensation draft pick. Okay. Compensatory pick. Is Bo's value low right now? Yes, it is. It's probably lower than this front office feels comfortable moving him during. But they're going to do their best to sell that this was an injury-marred season. It obviously was. The fact that his calf injury has lingered, I mean, it is really tough to swing the bat well when your base is not solid, right? And that's the thing with Bo's leg kick and everything. That calf is a major piece in his mechanics, and if he can't load up on that leg, you're kind of fucked, right? So hopefully there is a way they can spin it where Bichette's career numbers are good enough that you can point to 2022 and 2021 when he led the league in hits. You can point to his September in 2022. You can point to how dominant he was in the first few months of 2023 before he wound up getting injured. There's all things, and I think at 26 years old, Bichette is going to have substantial value on the market, especially if there's an organization out there that thinks that they can trade for Bichette and then lock him up long term. If he is just a rental piece, which is also possible, bloodline players, they know the business, right? We are seeing this from Vladdy. We've seen it from Bo. We see it across the league with guys whose dads played or uncles played in the league. They know how the business works, which is you're going to make the most money you can make in free agency. These are both guys in Vlad and Bo that are 1 year away from that payday. And it's probably going to be pretty difficult to convince them to extend, whether it is in a situation like Bo, where maybe he's traded, or with Vlad, where I think Vlad is very much into staying in Toronto. But I think he also would like to know how much he could get on the open market. And the way to do that is Aaron Judge this thing, right? Give Toronto the last right of refusal when it comes to the contract, but force their hand and actually go to the open market. So we'll see how things play out. I know a lot of people have said Bo has a bad attitude. I was having some beers with my buddy, fellow comedian. Shout out to Jason Cooper. He was actually on Baseball Town last month representing the Oakland Athletics. He was roasting the Dodgers, did a great job. Really funny guy. But we were watching the Jays and the Reds game yesterday, and Bichette came up and his attitude, his bad attitude. And Jason's question to me was, what if Bo's right? Which I love. It's like, what if Bo doesn't have a bad attitude? What if Bo has the right attitude for this front office and he should be upset? And maybe the other players on this team should also be equally as upset. I know we're seeing we're seeing little pieces of it. We're gonna get into the Chris Bassitt comments. There's a question on that, so I don't want to get into it too quick here. But there are players who have subtly pushed back, and I don't know if this is just the fans were so frustrated with this front office with Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins that it's easy to see these players are also frustrated, right? And we're just kind of taking some liberties here in the actual interpretation of what they're saying. But it does feel like some of these players are also kind of frustrated with this front office's approach. What if Bo's right? I just love that everyone's like, he's got a bad attitude. I hate his body language. What if his body language is nailing it, right? Grounds crew, what do you think? Is Bo Bichette actually going to be traded this offseason? If there is a time for him to be traded, I think the offseason, it has to be it. I don't like the idea of running it in and seeing where this team's at and then moving him at the trade deadline. I think you pick between Bo and Vlad. Vlad seems more into staying with Toronto. Another thing that Chris Bassitt mentioned, again, we will get into all of his comments there when he was on the Chris Rose show, but if Vlad's the guy you keep, you need to move Bo in the offseason. And I think the reason for that is that if Bo is going to walk no matter what, and he's checked out and he doesn't really wish to be there, yes, obviously that's not the approach a professional is going to take, especially approaching free agency. Bo's probably going to have a very good year next year, even if he is checked out a little bit. I mean, there's a ton of money. There's a ton of money on the line. There's a major payday for Bo Bichette on the line. And of course, he's going to do everything he can to enter 2025 healthy, to have the season that we're used to seeing as Jays fans. We watched him in 2021. We watched him in 2022. And these are two seasons where he played 160 games in 2021 and 161 in 2022. Almost full seasons. Led the league in hits. There's a lot to like in Bo, and there's obviously some very tangible value attached to him. So if you're just going to lose him in free agency, I think you absolutely have to move on from him. This isn't me, by the way, saying, I want to trade Bo Bichette. I do not want to trade Bo Bichette. What I really wish would happen is that whatever fractures in this relationship had happened between the front office and Bo can be mended, and maybe there's some sort of deal that can be worked out long term. I just don't think it's possible with Shapiro and Atkins at the helm. I don't think that that is where we're at. I do think that this front office is going to be pushed into a scenario by Rodgers and the fan base to maybe sign a mega deal with Vladdy. But even that, we'll need to wait and see what happens there. But boy, oh boy, will I ever be mad. Will I ever be angry at this whole situation if they lose their two core pieces from the last year, from the last 5 years in Bo and Vlad, and get compensation draft picks for them? Be completely unacceptable. Last question and comment from Twitter. A big thanks to all of you who did reach out. I know that I only got to about 20% of the messages from Twitter over the last week. It's the way it rolls. Just keep trying. I know Jenna mentioned it. She's reached out for the last 3 weeks. She finally gets in. So just keep trying. The last Twitter one, again, you can reach out at Walk Off Podcast, is from Tracy. She goes, "Hey, Walk Off. I hate I keep missing Baseball Town. I swear I will be at the next one." So Baseball Town is the live show we've been running all summer long, monthly. We've had some incredible guests on this show. I know last September we had Jay Jackson and Davis Schneider, but it has been so much bigger than I could have ever anticipated. Just the guests, Sportsnet has come out in full force. Show Ali, Blake Murphy, Ben Schulman, MLB.com, Keegan Matheson, and Julia Cruz. Anyways, long story short, yes, you got to get there, Tracy. September 12th is the next show, and I have some major guests lined up. I'm not going to spoil it quite yet until I get full confirmation from them, but I should have that before the end of the week. I will put tickets up right now, so they will be in the comments section. Again, I cannot stress enough. If you are a baseball fan, this is such a fun show. It's funny, it's lighthearted, and then the panel at the end with all of the experts and Blue Jays insiders, and then we let you take questions and comments. It's great. It's just a good time, and it's a really good hang at the end too. Anyways, I've gotten off the rails here, as I'm prone to doing. So Tracy says, did you guys see Chris Bassitt on Chris Rose yesterday? Holy shit. The honesty on that dude is the only thing on this team that's actually next level. Very funny, Tracy. I like that. What were your thoughts on what he had to say? If you did not listen to Chris Bassitt's comments, you really should do yourself a favor and do it. It was so refreshing to hear such an honest and open conversation about this year's season as a Toronto Blue Jay fan, right? Like, to listen to one of the guys on this team just lay it out like Chris Bassitt laid it out. It was a thing of beauty. A few things stood out, things that we as the fan base already knew, but the front office does this thing sometimes where it almost feels like gaslighting a little bit, where they kind of spin it like, we were right. It's crazy that this didn't work out the way we wanted to. Everyone else is crazy. You know, it does feel that way sometimes, but to have Chris Bassitt come right out and say these sort of things, he said, we put $700 million in the Shohei Ohtani basket and didn't get him, and then couldn't pivot. This isn't news to Blue Jays fans, right, grounds crew? We were well aware that once we missed out on Shohei Ohtani, they did not pivot. I love Justin Turner. I really do, but to rely on a 39-year-old on the back end of his career to increase the offense, to rely on Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who again exceeded expectations for us Blue Jays fans. He was so good this year. And he got a pretty decent return back. In fact, speaking of that, Charles McAdoo, he was the prospect from the Pirates that came back for IKF. He's joining the show, so he's going to be joining us next Wednesday. Charles McAdoo, the brand new Blue Jay currently lacing up for the New Hampshire Fisher Cats, is going to be on the show, so keep an eye out for that. If you are a Patreon member, you will get it instantly, and then we should have that out probably, I don't know, a week and a half from right now. Keep an eye out for it. Charles McAdoo on the walk-off. But what I was getting at is that the pivot from Shohei Ohtani wasn't enough. As good as IKF was, as much as I like Justin Turner, and this is where the next comment really hit home, because Chris Bassitt then said, you need 3 to 4 superstars on any legit contender. 3 to 4 superstars, which is a not so subtle way of saying we do not have 3 to 4 superstars. They've got Vladdy. Bichette, I would say, is a superstar, although he sure as hell has not played like it in 2024. He has had a horrible season, but I really do believe that part of that is due to his calf injury, is due to the fact that he hasn't been able to stay on the field, and is due to the fact he's unhappy in Toronto. So can we replace that? Maybe. I don't know. But if you need 3 to 4 superstars and you only have one, there's some heavy lifting to do in the offseason to make up for that. And the fact that Chris Bassitt has the, I don't know, for lack of a better term, balls, I guess, intestinal fortitude to come out in public and say that this is something that is lacking without really saying it, right? Chris Bassitt is a very smart dude. He is good with his words. He's not throwing anyone under the bus. But he did have a way of kind of painting the problems and painting the picture of the 2024 season in a way that we were all like, yes, this is what we've been saying. It was validating to hear someone on the team kind of mention all of the problems and the things that this front office missed that we've been saying right from the start. So the other thing that stood out to me about Chris Bassitt's talk on Chris Rose, he says, thinks Vlad wants to be a Blue Jay for life. So he also said, I don't want to put words in his mouth, and he's not shooting his mouth off. Of course, Vlad, he's not. We mentioned this a little earlier in the show, right? This is a Bloodlines guy. He knows how to play the business. There's no way he's going to do anything or say anything that is going to diminish the amount of money that he can make on the open market or even in an extension if that's the way it goes in the offseason here and he winds up getting overpaid, which is what this organization would probably need to do to keep him. Finally, he says, I don't want to identify some of the problems because some of the problems can't be fixed. Now, I loved this comment. I think a lot of us did. There's a lot of different ways that this can be interpreted, and obviously it was vague enough that he can stay out of trouble. I do get the feeling that he's speaking about the front office. Of course, right away after this interview is released, what happens? Oh, Sportsnet runs out to clarify, right? Love Arden, love Shy. Both friends of the show, both have been on numerous times on the walk-off and appreciate their time, but they definitely were sent out to smooth things over. So let's get into a little bit of the clarification here and what exactly Chris Bassitt says he truly did mean. So this is Bassitt said his reference to the Blue Jays not having a pivot after an unsuccessful pursuit of Shohei Ohtani was referring to a lack of impactful alternatives on the free agent market. My apologies. I just completely butchered that, but you guys get what I'm saying here. So this is Chris Bassitt on that. There's no pivot after Ohtani. And there wasn't. I mean, he was the one big dog on the free agent market. We've already talked about this so much, how free agency's changing. So many organizations are locking up their young generational talent long term. So there aren't these mega talents hitting the free agent market at 27, 28 years old. So there's no pivot point after Ohtani. Ohtani was the number one, the so-called big fish, and we didn't get it. The free agent market was Ohtani. There wasn't like a number one and a number two and a number three. It wasn't. We went after the biggest guy. Unfortunately, we didn't get him. That's not a knock against the Blue Jays. It's a knock against and it's not a knock against anybody. He obviously picked a great team. There wasn't another option. That's just reality. And I don't think anyone took what Chris Bassitt said about that for anything more than that, and that this front office probably should have seen that as a deficiency in the market long before they were in it this deep and corrected before that, which is not what happened. Bassitt also said his comment about unfixable problems was in reference to circumstances out of the Blue Jays' control rather than structural issues within the organization. A little bit of backtracking here. I think it is structural issues within the organization. Personally, I know I'm not alone. So this is Chris Bassitt. He says, I'm going to be 36 next year. You can't change me to 26. You can't change age. You can't change things like that. I think too many people will see the Chris Rose interview and be like, oh shit, he's talking about a massive problem. Things are going really, really bad and they can't solve them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's variables in the game that you can literally not change. I mean, it's a nice backtrack. uh, I don't know if that's exactly what he meant, and we're only going to be able to speculate on this, but I do get the sense that Chris Bassitt is a little frustrated with the structural organization of this front office. Will it change? I don't know. I was talking about, for those of you out there who haven't seen it, this is probably a reference that goes right over your head. It's fine. But Ford versus Ferrari. I don't know if everyone has seen this movie or not. I actually quite enjoyed it. Matt Damon, and then who's Batman again? I can't believe his name's escaping me. Anyways, irrelevant. Matt Damon and Batman in Ferrari versus Ford. So there is a scene when they're in the Ford um banquet room, or there's the boardroom. There it is. Sorry, gang, it is early and my brain obviously isn't working. But there's a moment when they're in the boardroom for the Ford versus Ferrari. And Batman says, all due respect, sir, you can't win a race by committee. You need one man in charge. And all I could think was about the Blue Jays. Hadn't even occurred to me. Again, I was with my buddy Jason Cooper yesterday. He brought this up. He's like, watch that movie again and then view it through the lens of the Blue Jays. And it's tough to deal with. And I was like, oh, great. Okay. Well, there you go. So I don't know if Bassitt was actually taking a shot at the front office, or if it's like he was saying, and just that he doesn't have a time machine and can't become younger. Uh, My guess is that there was more to it than just him saying he can't reverse age. All right, moving on. We are getting into the Discord and Patreon part of things here. This is from Philip. He says, they need to extend Guerrero immediately. And yes, they desperately need a feared hitter like Teoscar Hernandez to protect him as well. I agree with George Springer being post his twilight, and maybe figure out a way to deal him, possibly even Chris Bassitt. Rogers is going to have to spend. I have zero sympathy for Rogers and the budget they have to work with. Skydome cost the city of Toronto $570 million to build, and then Rogers went and bought the Skydome for $25 million. Yes, this is true. And then they bought 80% of the Blue Jays for $160 million. So they got the Blue Jays and stadium for under $200 million. Talk about making off like bandits. Zero sympathy. By comparison, the Miami Marlins are MLB's most affordable team to purchase at a going rate of $1 billion American. Rogers needs to stop being cheapskates. So I agreed with Phil on everything he said there, up until Rogers needs to stop being cheapskates. I get the sentiment, because they did this front office put themselves in this situation where free agency is one of the only real ways, tangible ways, where they can bolster this team. Yes, they can make some trades. Again, the system is not very deep, right? Prospects, development. This is something that has been the Achilles heel of this front office for years now. They don't develop players very well. The farm system ranks fairly lowly. So it's going to be tough to go out and spend prospect capital to bolster this rotation. So it does make the most sense to hit free agency. Can you move Bo and get something valuable in return that can pan out right away? Maybe, possibly. It's really threading the needle there, but it's not impossible. It is baseball. I will say, with the cheapskate comment, that I get it, because you have no sympathy for them, right? And you're like, this, you're in this position because of your discrepancies. That said, they are the 6th highest ranked payroll in baseball for 2024. It is tough to really get hard and be like, they don't spend enough money. They're spending a lot of money. Now, the allocation of funds could be definitely investigated a little bit here and maybe reworked. Grounds crew, do you think that they can fix the problems going into 2025 with money? And how much money is that going to take? What are your thoughts? Drop your comments. I'll tackle some of this on Friday, and then we'll even try and get back into it next mailbag, because I do think that there is something to be said for spending big on the right guys. I just don't know if this front office is going to pull that off. Next comment is from Mark Drabert. This is a mailbag question. He says, how do you want the Jays to allocate their free agent money this offseason? By my quick, terrible math, after re-signing their own players from arbitration, they'll have about $70 million to be around their 2024 budget. I would take $60 million of that and spend it on a starting pitcher and the two best bats you can find. Then I'd take the other $10 million and buy a bullpen and cross your fingers. Fill in the rest with Buffalo boys and a cheap defensive catcher. Does that make them a contender? Question mark, question mark, question mark. I highly doubt it. And then he wrote out the lineup that he envisioned here. So Bichette in the leadoff spot, Vladdy in the 2-hole, free agent left fielder, free agent DH in 3 and 4, Horowitz in 5, Springer 6, Varsho 7, Kirky hitting 8th, and then Ernie Clement penciled in to third base in the 9-hole. And then his starting pitchers are Gausman, free agent, so a number 2 pitcher, somebody high up on the chain there. Jose Barrios, Chris Bassitt, and Wyrod, Yariel, wrapping things up there. Yeah, I mean, more or less, that's pretty much how I view it, too. They definitely need to go out and get a starting pitcher, somebody who can slide in to the upper level, the upper end of that starting rotation, I think is important. And then if you get a bit of a bounce back from Jose Barrios and his downward trend stops, great. If Chris Bassitt repeats what he's done in the last 2 years, great. But at least if you go out and get a number 2, you're not in that panic mode of really needing to see the same or even better production out of your aging starters. I don't know if 60 million is enough for 2 big bats and a starting pitcher. It's where this team is at. I don't know exactly how they expect to compete in 2025. Believe me, I really hope they do. I hope that my doubt is thrown in my face next season. I hope that you, the grounds crew, can write comments like, Belford, remember when you were such a moron and doubted Ross Atkins? Boy, oh boy, aren't you eating your words now? That's the dream. I'm just having a tough time seeing how this money is allocated and whether it's going to be allocated properly. This front office loves to get redundant. We saw it with Varsho and Kiermaier. We saw it with IKF and Clement. It's like, are they just going to go out and get a replicate of another guy we already have on this team rather than spending the money where we need it? I don't know. Time will tell. We are getting along in the tooth here, so we've got a few more to get to. This next one is from Johnny Eaton. He says, I get the feeling like most are thinking World Series winning or division winning when they say competitive in 2025. All it takes to get into the playoffs is 6 to 8 games over 500 in a 162 game season. That's the psychology trick the front office is using that fans seem to be falling for. They're saying competitive while meaning capable of squeaking into the playoffs, which is achievable. And I agree with Johnny here. It probably is achievable for this team to win 85 games next year if they do it right and squeak into that third wild card spot. Being better than the Orioles or Yankees, that's not a reasonable expectation. The fans know this. But they also don't seem to register that's likely not the front office expectations unless they are really, truly, fully delusional and still, despite all empirical evidence, think this team is better than it is on paper, which is possible. But I think more likely they just are hoping for a wild card spot, hope for the best, and know that being competitive in that sense, you are going to get the people out to watch the games. You're going to. Moving on to YouTube. This is from Warloo22. It's funny. Warloo is a regular commenter. He's been watching the show for years. Appreciate the patronage. I don't know if I'm reading this wrong or not. All right. So if I'm putting too much sass on this, my apologies. He says the majority of blue. I can't help but read it this like all. The majority of Blue Jays fans don't deserve Vlad. You two are no different. He has nothing to prove. The only players with better numbers at his age are in the Hall of Fame are on their way. This is true, by the way. Warloo brings up a very good point that if you do kind of start breaking down Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s numbers, whether they have been consistent throughout his 5 years or not, they do stack up as Hall of Fame numbers are on that way when you start comparing them to other guys in that age range. He's playing with a team of feel-good stories. This is also another very good point. Okay, and I love Spencer Horowitz. I love Leo Jimenez. I'm a big Davis Schneider fan. I know he's in a huge slump right now. I'm a big component of what's going on with Will Wagner and Joey Loperfido and you know all this youth infusion, the youth invasion, if you will. But the Chris Bassitt touched on it, right? You need 3 to 4 superstars. That's not what they're playing with right now. Warloo goes on, I would rather have talent. The Angels haven't had a winning season since 2015 with a combination of Pujols, Trout, and Ohtani. They get none of the blame. I've said it before. If you don't like Vlad, it doesn't have nothing to do with baseball. I mean, I agree with pretty much all of that. I don't remember shit talking Vladdy. He says, you two are no different. This is from the JD Bunkus podcast we did on Friday. I felt like we were both advocates of they should sign Vladdy long term, but maybe I pushed back a little bit just with the first base aspect of things. And is he worth that money? I'm not saying he has anything to prove to me. I mean, he's been out of this world, especially this season. He's been a top 5 player in baseball in 2024. You can't ask for much more than that. Do I hope they sign him? Fuck, yes, I do. I mean, there is a danger with signing a first baseman to mega money. We watched it with Albert Pujols, Prince Fielder Jr. I mean, there are lots of examples of first basemen that didn't really work out when you got mega deals there. But Vladdy's 25 years old and is an exceptional talent and is prepared to come to Toronto, according to all the lip service. Do we even know if Shohei Ohtani was prepared to, or was he just leveraging the Jays? It feels like they were leveraging. Does Juan Soto want to come to Toronto, or is he happy where he is, or wants to stay in the U.S.? We don't know, but we do know Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has enjoyed his time in Toronto, has a tie to Canada, being born in Montreal, and his dad playing there, and has said he wants to stay. So maybe that's enough to overpay him to get a player of his ilk long-term in Toronto. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Drop your comments below. Thank you, Warloo. And if I read that comment with too much sass, my apologies. Oshawa Bob, first of all, my man, it is good to hear from you. Glad that your health is on the upswing here. Oshawa Bob is a longtime walk-off listener, and I know that he kind of disappeared for a few months there. We were worried. I actually, to a point where I reached out and was like, "Hey, you're still kicking, right, Bobby?" And yeah, so he's out in Oshawa, and he has mentioned numerous times about the pictures being crooked. Bob, I just want to say, I swear I've got a level out. They are even on the wall. My problem is I'm in a Toronto basement where the floor is uneven. And so the camera sometimes is in these weird angles. And sometimes the camera's angled, which is just like a House of Mirrors nightmare. And my apologies, that is driving everyone with a little bit of OCD in them crazy. It reminds me of a Rory Scovel joke where he would go on stage with his hoodie, and the one thread, the one string of his hoodie would be 2 inches, and then the other one would be super long and down to his knee. And he wouldn't address it, and he'd just tell jokes, and people would lose their mind, right? The OCD and the folks out there would be like, what are you doing? Even it out. So I get it. And my apologies if I'm driving people crazy with the pictures. I swear they're even. It's the camera. Not a lot I can do. All right. That's not what Oshawa Bob's comment was, by the way. Not this time. He has mentioned I just wanted to defend that I can hang a picture straight. It's just the camera angle, and I'm sticking with that. So Oshawa Bob says JD. So he's commenting on the JD Bunkus guest appearance on Friday's show, which thrilled to have JD Bunkus on the show. I really enjoy his takes, and it was great that he took the time to join us. JD, it has taken me a while, if I'm being very honest, but I have grown to enjoy your podcast a lot. I truly love the walk-off, and it shows that the walk-off and team are growing with great content. Thank you for the support of the show you have given. So, yes, thank you to JD for coming on the show, and thank you, Bob. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. Last and not least is a comment from Chooch Aru. This is also from the Friday episode with JD Bunkus. He says, love this collab. Great listen. Much better than Jay's games right now. JD seems in touch with fans and doesn't come off as a Sportsnet Rogers shill at all. Ultimately, I don't see the Jays having the money for the free agents that they need. Yes, 50 million to 70 million makes them better, but not good enough to win it all. This is a huge fear for me as a fan because Rogers might just be telling them to get the fans back in the building. Wild card is fine. And this just leads to mediocrity and never being quite good enough. And it is scary. Middling is a scary idea, especially in baseball, because you can get stuck in the middle for a long time. Just ask the 1997 to 2014 Blue Jays. The middle is an ugly place to be. On that, we will wrap things up. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions and comments. I know that I rambled on numerous times, got off topic. Appreciate you dealing with it. Friday, Adam Max should be back. And then long toss on Sunday. I swear we're doing our best to get it back up and going on Sunday. All the best. Have a great week, everybody. Fingers crossed that I get to chat with Joey Votto today or tomorrow. And if so, keep an eye out on the channel and our socials, and I will be putting that out as quickly as I can. Take care, everybody, and enjoy your day.